Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of KSP Resurgence. This is going to be a much longer video because I'll be exploring the entirety of the Hades system in this episode. Or at least most of it. I'll be doing a whole lot of landings, and unfortunately my footage got a little tainted because for some reason everything is shifted downward and there's a noticeable black bar at the top of the screen. Unfortunately, this will be appearing a couple future episodes, but thankfully I managed to get that sorted out before it could cause any more damage to my videos. Anyway, our next target is going to be Milena. It's a vacuum world with a very interesting blue icy spot on it. After that, we're going to be landing on Iris, a habitable planet of Hades, which surprisingly has life in an ocean and a breathable atmosphere, despite being in a very strange place. After that, we got a couple other bodies, but I'm not going to spoil the next step, the entirety of the episode. Going to Milena is a cakewalk, meaning Hades is very, very small. It's a brown dwarf. It's around the size of a gas giant, slightly larger, probably. The orbit of the farthest out planet in the Hades system fixed within the orbit of Daystar, which is the closest planet in the Harmonious system. So it's a very small place. In fact, it could probably orbit around Hades like in a day. So it's practically like orbiting a big, bright, pink gas giant that glows. I will be coming in from a polar trajectory just to make sure I can get a survey scan. I have no idea why, but it seems the delta V requirements for the Hades system is a lot higher. It takes me 4,000 meters per second just to get into a stable orbit around Milena, which is not ideal, but this is an interstellar vehicle, so 4,000 will just be a drop in the bucket. Besides, you can probably have millions of delta V with this. I did scuff the burn a little bit, so the trajectory is not ideal. We're on an impact course, but thankfully it's easily correctable. Always really bugs me when I try to time warp to a maneuver, but I end up fat fingering it and end up going way past the maneuver node. Which is what I did right there. I gotta be more disciplined when it comes to time warping. I don't have to get into an exact polar orbit to get the survey scan. If I were using something like ScanStat, probably paid to be a bit more accurate, considering scans actually take time. Though this is not my final trajectory, I do want to get to a equatorial orbit before I attempt a landing. And Milena is just a rocky planet, sorry, I keep saying moon. That seemed all that interesting, but there is a blue spot that's completely covered in ice around the Terminator line, because I do believe this is might be tidally locked, if I recall correctly. I think a whole lot of places in this solar system are tidally locked. Like Iris is definitely tidally locked. It has a huge eye, for crying out loud, because of its tidally locked, I guess, whatever you say. But the Hades system has a bunch of interesting locations. Of course, landing here is extremely easy because I do have a extremely overbuilt lander for this. Has a really good TWR, meant to land on really heavy planets and moons. In fact, the whole reason I designed this lander with so much delta V and so much thrust was because Arch, which is a moon from Celestial Harmony, has like 0.8 Gs of gravity, so it's almost like Tylo. Thankfully, there aren't really any other planets I have to explore there around that. However, in the Anubis system, which is also added by Cosmic Serenity, it's a pulsar with 3 planets. One of them is the core of a gas giant that has almost 2 Gs, so it's very, very heavy, and I'm probably going to have to design a much more crazy lander just to be able to manage to land on it. To be honest, I really think this big blue spot would be an excellent place for a colony of sorts. Now, when I actually checked the survey scan, there are actually no viable resources, but that was because my configs are bugged because I was using an older version of this mod. Thankfully, that issue has since then been amended, so if I do end up doing an interstellar colony in a future series here, I definitely definitely probably do it here. Unless the resources aren't that bad. Now the blue spot is mostly covering ice, but we just so happened to landing a part that wasn't covering ice, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a hop just to be able to see what the ice spikes look like. I do have to take a beautiful screenshot, and since we didn't land in a different biome, I'm just going to return to orbit and not bother doing an EVA. Just because EVAs take time, and this video is already 40 minutes long, I don't want to waste any EVA's time. I also do an experiment with longer videos. I did say that in last episode, but it turns out it actually cut a whole lot out by the time that last episode turned out to be like the regular time, even though I was planning for it to be a longer episode. So this is definitely going to be a longer episode in the long run. I do enjoy having longer videos just because I can put more content in, but it's just that the voiceovers take much longer, and also I'm not sure how adding length to my videos will improve performance, just because this day and age everyone has low attention spans and can't watch videos for more than 30 seconds. So I'll just see how it goes with this longer video. Maybe I'll actually do a lot better than my other videos, because Cosmic Serenity has gotten me a whole lot of views. So I'm definitely going to be making a whole lot more videos with this mod, considering it's going to get an update next month. Do end up scuffing the docking of this, so I do have to get some help from Excalibur, performing the legendary Loung Lazy method of docking. Now for this mission, I'm not going to recover a whole lot of science, because most of it's just going to go straight to the laboratories, which will end up getting me a whole lot more science, because that's how laboratories work in Kerbal Space Program. You put science experiments and they practically multiply your science, and also give the ability to transmit it back to the Kerbal Space Center without the need of actually sending it back physically. Now, in interstellar distances, stock antenna do not work. In fact, a whole lot of modded antenna just do not work at such distances. So, thankfully, Celestial Harmony, which is a main system replacer planet pack I'm using for this series, actually comes with a part to allow you to communicate interstellar. It has like some ridiculous range that shouldn't physically be possible, but it's still a very nice part to have. I don't care about realism when it comes to communications. I do believe Kerbal Star Systems 2 also comes with a few parts for interstellar communications. So that's a really nice feature. I feel like there should be more mods for long-scale communication, and I feel like the ones that already exist for long-range communication don't really reach interstellar distances. Next, time to visit by far, debatably the most interesting place in the entire Hades system. Iris is very strange because it actually has life on its surface. It also has a breathable atmosphere, so it's the perfect place to build a colony. It is tightly locked though, so in the part that's facing Hades, it's actually a giant ocean called the Void, and there's a constant hurricane going on there. On the back is probably a frozen wasteland that you probably wouldn't want to visit for too long, just because of how cold it is. But on the Terminator line, where it's kind of like permanent sunset, it's a very pleasant place to be. It actually has rainbows, which is it's a first for Kerbal Space Program planet packs, if I recall correctly. I do enjoy how people are pushing the bar when it comes to developing these mod packs. I feel like this would be the perfect place to build a colony because it is habitable, but once again my resources are still bugged, so I wouldn't really know what resources are available if I decide to do Kerbal colonies. Now, in the future, I don't think I'll be using Kerbal colonies to build any colonies. I'll just be using Kerbal constructs. I feel like having to transfer Kerbals and hard to mine resources to the colony over and over again at interstellar distances, even with warp drives, would be incredibly tedious. Besides, after this mission's done, and after Resurgence is over, I'll probably have the technology to actually start using jump gates, which will probably be my headcanon excuse for just using Kerbal constructs to use it as a regular launch site. By the way, after my Anubis mission, Kerbal Space Program Resurgence will end as a series, but the save file, I'm gonna continue it in a new series. Now I did pack the Helian space plane for a reason, because Iris has a thick, breathable atmosphere, so space planes are perfect for being used here. I also did tweak my volumetric cloud setting because my PC was turning into a space heater nuclear reactor type machine, so I really would rather keep my PC in a somewhat decent health. Now the Helian SSTO, which is what I'm using, it's powered by an engine from Impulse Party, which is basically a really high-spec fusion rocket that works well in all atmospheres. And it's not really a fusion engine, it just requires a whole lot of electric charge, which will usually be provided by the fusion reactors Impulse Party offers. But I'm using Stirling Systems power cell for this. It uses a redox reaction between an oxidizer and beryllium to generate a whole lot of electric charge very quickly. Sure, I mean, it's not efficient as, say, a nuclear reactor, but it does produce a whole lot more electricity for its size. Another thing I'd like to mention about the future of this series is that my Anubis system Grand Tour, I'm planning on having it be a really amazing, stunning cinematic. So for that reason, it's not visible in this video because I added it afterward, but I will be adding MechJeb to this save just because I really want to be able to automate things so I can easily record my cinematics. I also added Kerbal camera tools just to make it possible, make it look amazing. And I should probably get back to what we're actually doing on screen. Rainbows! They're very pink considering Hades only emits pink light, primarily, but it's still a rainbow. And I don't think any other Kerbal Space Program Planet Pack has included rainbows before. So it's a really nice addition to Kerbal Space Program as a whole. And we come down to a landing really close to this really nice river, right by a bunch of weird trees that are very, very alien. Gotta be careful not to stall. Thankfully I did turn off parallax scatter collisions, because if I had those on, it would probably be impossible to land here. Come down for a nice, beautiful landing. I did tinker with my parallax settings, but that required a game restart, so I did have to load a quick save and perform the landing again. But we did land in a similar location, so it doesn't matter. First thing we're going to do is, of course, collect all the science, because Iris, being a habitable alien world, probably has a whole lot of science opportunities available. I did also collect some while I was flying, just so I can get some extra science from flying high and flying low. I also did actually remember to pack the EVA science equipment, so thankfully I'll be able to utilize that experiment. Now we get to witness the most expensive golf session in the entire game. 1 to 2 Kerbal light years just to play some golf. This has been quite the journey for all these Kerbals. The Kerbals take off their helmets and actually get to breathe in the atmosphere. I mean, the alien life might actually like make them sick, but this is Kerbal Space Program, so like nobody cares, and nobody cares about taking risks. The EVA jetpacks also do not work at this with this gravity and atmospheric pressure, so they're completely useless. Thankfully, the Helion does come with a conveniently placed ladder, so Kerbals can actually go on EVA and actually walk back into the space plane without the need of actually retracting the landing gear. In some of my previous space planes, if you landed on an extraterrestrial body and couldn't use the EVA jetpack, I retract the landing gear just to make the cockpit easily accessible. But for some reason, doing that like puts the game, deceives the game, and makes you think you're landing even though you actually take off and start flying, which makes getting to orbit borderline impossible. It's the infamous false landing state glitch, one of the many bugs in Kerbal Space Program. I love how Kerbal Space Program, despite its flaws, is an amazing game that many enjoy. I've kind of noticed that Kerbal Space Program has made somewhat of a resurgence, pun completely intended, in recent times, just because of numerous things, like the Artemis 2 launch, Hail Mary movie coming out, and I really like how the Kerbal Space Program communities have gotten a kind of a boost after this, after being kicked in the face by Take-Two after the old yeller Kerbal Space Program 2. Now that was a great little excursion to the surface of Iris, but now it's time to return to orbit. Now, Iris actually has an asteroid moon named Cornea, and I'm actually going to land there using this space plane. Now, the Helion is not designed for any vacuum operations on while landing. However, Cornea is very, very low in gravity, so I'm sure just a little landing on it wouldn't hurt. During this flight, we also get to see a nice view of the void down below, which is the big, humongous ocean on Iris that is on the sun-facing side of the whole planet. Another thing I should mention that Iris is completely covered in aurora almost everywhere, especially on the sun-facing part of the side. I'm sure Hades is releasing tons and tons of cosmic radiation, but it's not enough cosmic radiation to kill the plants on here. Who knows, maybe they've developed some kind of biological safeguards against cosmic radiation. In fact, bacteria has actually been found on the surface of the International Space Station. They've actually become somewhat vacuum hardened, if I recall correctly. I'm not sure, I'll have to look that up to double check. I mean, there are definitely organisms that can survive in the vacuum of space, like tardigrades can actually enter a state of hibernation or torpor and actually are able to survive in space for an extended period amount of time, though they're not actually alive, they're kind of like sleeping somewhat. It still counts as being able to survive in a vacuum without the need of some kind of spacesuit. Cornea is a very small asteroid moon. I'm actually be landing on it right now. I've actually landed space planes on vacuum worlds before. You kind of just have to like land it like a normal vacuum lander by just pointing retrograde. But when you're about to touch the surface, you kind of turn around to use your landing gear. In high gravity worlds, it's very impractical, but in a low gravity setting, you can easily get away with stuff like this. Especially if your reaction wheels allow you to be able to turn upright while you're landing on your landing gear. I feel like reaction wheels in Kerbal Space Program are kind of overpowered, but it makes the game a lot easier and just allows you to let your designs actually be playable. I bet you we've definitely voided the Helian's warranty by now. Oh well, I guess I'm not doing a career save, so it wouldn't be important if I had to replace this thing if something happened to it. The gravity is almost 0 here, so Kerbals can easily float around with the EVA jetpack, unlike Iris. I should probably also mention why I'm kind of taking a break from doing KSP Wayfinders, which is my other series, just because I really want to be able to finish Resurgence before the update for Cosmic Serenity comes out, which is going to add a whole new star system and a whole lot of planets to explore. I do believe one of the gas giants in the new system actually will have seasons, so actually change color based on what season it's on, which I think is a really, really beautiful and immersive feature that has kind of brand new to the whole Kerbal Space Program scene. We've lately been seeing a whole lot of seasonal related features in new Kerbal Space Program planet packs. Like, I think Kerbal Star Systems 2 actually has gas giants that change color also based on the seasons that they're on. I didn't put too many Kerbals on EVA just because I don't want to taking a Kerbal in and out of a vehicle takes a lot of time, and I just don't want to waste too much time. Return to orbit is very easy. I can probably just go on an escape trajectory and just rendezvous directly with the Excalibur. It's actually what I ended up doing here. Despite this weird trajectory, rendezvous was actually very easy. All it required was a small mid-course correction burn, and unfortunately, the Phantom Forces strike again. It's a weird bug that sometimes the velocity of your spacecraft changes even though you're not actually doing anything. Thankfully, it's just a quick load and quick save and quick load away from being fixed. Flying a rendezvous maneuver is very easy for me, considering I've done this many times before. And to the power of magic of editing, I can actually just cut straight to the final approach and docking. I'm sure our labs are completely overflowing with science at this point. Thankfully, you can store experiments and put them in the lab later. Even if it'll still take tons of time to actually process the lab experiments, the Kerbals do have plenty of time to get through the data while they coast back to a harmonious system in an interstellar voyage back home. Now that we've completely explored Iris, it's time to move on to the next planet, which is going to be Enmy. Enmy is a desert planet with a very thin atmosphere. I think it's kind of like a desert. It kind of reminds me of a mesa, to be honest, considering how everything's kind of reddish. Meaning that might be Hades' fault. Enemy is a lot further out and probably a lot colder. The thin atmosphere made it very, very difficult to land here with the space plane. But more on that later. It was a very scuffed landing. If I could make a colony on Iris or Milena, Enemy would probably be another good option, just because I like the way it looks. It also does have an atmosphere, which makes it a little bit more like home. It also has a bit more gravity. I believe it had like 0.5 or 0.6 Gs of gravity, so it wouldn't be as jarring as, say, a moon-sized moon like a Krob or Creek, which probably have only 0.2 Gs of gravity. You know, after doing our polar scan and seeing all the resources, I gotta do my inclination change, because doing a landing at an equatorial trajectory is a lot more efficient, considering you have the rotation of the planet on your side. Now it's time to land on Enmy. Enemy has a very, very, very thin atmosphere, so landing here is incredibly difficult. That took me a couple attempts to actually get it right. In fact, this attempt I actually thought I was going to fail. We'll see why in a moment. I did slow down a whole lot just to make sure I could actually have a chance of slowing down. I thought I was going to fail, but just somehow I managed to actually pull up right when I was about to crash into the ground. That is definitely the most Kerbal landing I've ever done in my entire Kerbal Space Program career. Even the touchdown was crazy. I actually ended up flipping upward. I did look at the cheat menu because I thought there was no way I could have survived that, but somehow I did. It's a miracle. Now, unlike Iris, the atmosphere is not breathable in any way, but it is thick enough to actually have some resemblance of flight. I mean, if you consider what I just did flying, then you can definitely fly here. I consider Enemy's atmospheric thickness to be kind of that awkward spot where it's too thin for a space plane, too thick for a conventional lander. Now, the helium SSTO can hold 6 crew members, but I only put 5 on here. Now, for the really eagle-eyed viewers, you might have actually noticed a few shooting stars actually falling from the sky, which is also kind of a new graphical improvement that a whole lot of planet packs have been implementing. There's actually one right where we were when all the Kerbals were on EVA doing the photo op. There's another one just there, towards the left on the screen. The sky sped up, so it's a little harder to notice, but it's still really nice to see these features. There's another falling meteorite too. Now, these are air-breathing engines. They work perfectly fine as long as there's an atmosphere. Of any gas too, but unfortunately, at only like 6,000 meters above sea level, the air gets too thin for them to operate, so they do end up shutting down pretty quickly. Thankfully, this vacuum engine actually ends up pulling most of the weight. I mean, it's not really a vacuum engine, it works just fine in an atmosphere. So it's not really a vacuum-only engine, but I do end up using only this engine in a vacuum because the other two engines are very inefficient in their closed cycle mode. In fact, I do believe they end up draining all of my hydrogen on the helium in like 2 seconds. Once again, through the power of editing, I can skip all the rendezvous garbage and actually skip to the part that's actually cool, the docking. Now, Enemy is the second to last planet in the Hades system. The final one is Caelus, or Caelus. It's spelled with a C, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Which is an ice giant with 3 moons. It's probably one of my favorite destinations. I don't really know if I have a favorite destination in the Hades system. To be honest, I like all of them. I really like the Folie's comet tail, which unfortunately was not visible in my previous video. I also like Milena's blue spot and Iris's cool life in rainbows. Enemy's cool, kind of like mesa-ish biomes are also very fun. I really do like the challenge of actually landing there. Caelus also has some very interesting places to visit. Considering it does have 3 moons, all of them are nice places to visit. I actually will be landing on all of them in this episode. I do have to like do some really weird maneuvers just to get an encounter. I also got a mod called the Science Lab Housekeeper, which automatically transmits science back home, which is a very convenient mod. It's really convenient because you don't actually have to stop time warp just to transmit science. Caelus will probably also be an amazing spot to colonize just because it actually has a lot of hydrogen around it. In fact, before I actually returned home from the Hades system, I actually used it to actually refuel Excalibur. Since the Scoopotron module I put on the top actually allows you to scoop all sorts of gases and even some weird substances I'm yet to actually utilize, like graviolum. I did clip 8 of them, 8 of the exoscoops into my Scoopotron module, but I mean, at this point in the game, I really just don't care about realism anymore. I just want to explore the system. I mean, I probably could have put 8 in there without clipping them, but I kind of wanted this to be a nice compact package. And only after a few days, you're completely topped out on fuel. For this reason, I'll actually be taking a more aggressive return trajectory, because I have a lot more fuel to burn, considering I am leaving on a full tank. I mean, if a space colony is just a place where you can refuel, then I guess Excalibur is a colony in itself. So I guess consider the Hades system colonized at this point. I would love to actually build a colony with Kerbal constructs here because the refueling opportunities are really abundant. Besides Anubis, it does have some places that would be nice to colonize, but 2 of the planets I would like to colonize have way too high gravity. So unfortunately, that will be a little bit harder to colonize. Now, instead of taking Excalibur to every single moon and lag out the entire game just because of the sheer part count, I'm going to utilize all of the fuel in this one lander. Because this vacuum lander has a ton of Delta V and can actually probably form a Joule 5 on its own, except for a lathe, because the engines do not work in an atmosphere of any kind. I mean, it can work in a very thin atmosphere, but other than that, it will not work. Now, the first moon is Lix. It's a very small asteroid moon, very similar to Cornea, though I do believe it has a little bit more ice on its surface. Lix is also pretty hard to actually rendezvous with because it's very small asteroid, so instead of like treating it as a moon you're getting an encounter with, expect it to treat it as a spaceship you're rendezvousing with. Because its sphere of influence is tiny, and you can probably fly through it in like a few minutes. So you do have to do a very weird burn to actually get into a stable orbit around it. Thankfully, my trajectory actually allowed me to perform the entirety of the burn in its sphere of influence, which gets rid of a whole lot of the bugs you may encounter when doing these weird maneuvers. I don't really have a reason to remain in orbit, so I'm just going to do a direct landing trajectory. Here we are on the surface of Lix. Rather orangish asteroid. Well, the orangey color it has probably doesn't actually reflect what it looks like. Considering Hades doesn't only emit a certain hue of light, it makes everything around it look pink. Similar to how a flare from Kerbal Star Systems 2 makes everything around it look orange. Now Hades from this distance is only like a small little spot. It still provides a good amount of light to the entirety of the Caelus system. One moon down, 2 to go. Our next destination is going to be a very interesting moon. It's called Jotunn, which is basically the glacier of the Hades system. Glacier is another moon of a gas giant in a different star system that I visited a couple episodes ago in Resurgence. Jotunn, like Glacier, has a bunch of cryovolcanoes which constantly spew ice and a bunch of other stuff into its very thin atmosphere. It's actually the reason it actually can sustain a very thin atmosphere. The engines on the lander I'm using cannot work in a thick, substantial atmosphere, but thankfully Jotunn's atmosphere is thin enough for me to be able to use them. Despite being thin, Jotunn's atmosphere does extend upward a pretty high amount. So a whole lot of consideration must be put into actually staying in orbit. Not very long after getting to an orbit, a suitable landing spot is identified. By suitable, I mean it's right by a cryovolcano and it looks like a cool spot to land. Right as the music ends, we actually perform a very solid landing right next to a cryovolcano. It's not really a volcano, it's more like a canyon that constantly has ice spewing out of it. It's more like a crack in the entire planet's crust. Maybe the cracks can be attributed to tidal forces between all the other moons and the ice giant itself, Caelus. Of course, I gotta do the obligatory flag planting. If we don't place a flag, nobody will know that we've been here. I've practically placed a flag on every planet I've actually landed on, except for Glarker because it's a completely ocean planet. After a quick touch-and-go landing, the crew on the lander actually return to orbit and move on to the third and final moon. Though they do have to fly in the cryovolcano just to see all the ice chunks fly by. Hopefully it doesn't damage the lander, though it did definitely void the warranty. Now constant thrust must be applied because the atmosphere does provide a decent amount of drag. Maybe good in some scenarios, but definitely not good on an escape trajectory. There's so many places in the Hades system I would absolutely love to colonize. I should probably put up a poll just to actually see where people want me to colonize, because there's so many options I just cannot decide myself. I mean, I probably could, but I'd rather leave it up to the viewers and let you guys have some input on where the series goes. Now the final moon of this entire humongous journey is going to be Chrome. Now, Chrome is a somewhat icy moon, similar to Jotunn, except it has no cryovolcanoes, no atmospheres, so it's somewhat comparable to Val in a sense. It's way less blue, because it's more of a pinkish color since it is orbiting Hades, which is a brown dwarf that is very pink for some reason. Nothing wrong with pink, it actually looks amazing. I do recall Chrome being a more substantially sized moon in the entire Hades system. Yeah, I'm doing a very, very risky EVA while I'm plummeting to the ground. Consider it vacuum skydiving. Would it be called skydiving if there's no sky? Like, would it be just called vacuum diving or space diving instead? I really have no idea. Maybe you should leave a comment on your thoughts on this very important issue. In fact, if you're watching this far, thanks for watching 40 minutes into this entire video. At this point, we've actually landed on every body in the entire Hades system. Except for Caelus and Hades itself, just because one's a gas giant, the other's a star. I mean, I could try dipping helium into Caelus' atmosphere, given it doesn't explode due to atmospheric re-entry. I'm sure I can definitely do a dip into the deeper parts of the atmosphere in return, because it does have a whole lot of delta V to work with. So with flags and footsteps on every body that I can actually land on, the only thing that's left for the Kerbals is to actually return home. But unfortunately, that will have to wait until next episode. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this one, and I'll see you all later.